The storm intruder. The torrential rain battered the roof of the isolated house, while thunder roared in the sky. Mariana was alone for the first time in months, enjoying the silence of the night to relax. Her parents had gone on a trip, leaving her in charge of the house. It was a rare opportunity to watch her favorite movies and sink into the comfort of the couch, while the storm outside created the perfect backdrop. The sound of rain, combined with the smell of freshly made popcorn, made everything feel cozy. Around 9 p.m., the atmosphere shifted. The electricity flickered briefly but stabilized. Mariana adjusted herself on the couch, turning up the volume on the TV. However, an unexpected sound made her pause. It was the doorbell. She frowned, thinking it might just be a glitch caused by the storm. The doorbell rang again, this time more insistently. Mariana hesitated. Who could be at the door in the middle of a storm? Rising slowly, she went to the entrance. Peeking through the peephole, all she saw was darkness. "Who is it?" she called out firmly, trying to sound confident. A muffled voice responded through the door. "I need to use the phone. I'm stuck in the rain." Something in the tone of that voice made her uneasy. It was hoarse and carried a hint of desperation. But there was also something else, something she couldn't quite identify. Mariana stepped back, choosing not to reply. The doorbell rang again, followed by frantic knocking. Determined, she returned to the couch, trying to ignore whatever was happening. Minutes passed, and the tension in the air seemed almost tangible. The storm worsened, and the thunder nearly drowned out the sound of the knocking, which had finally ceased. Mariana began to relax, convinced that whoever it was had left. Then she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. The creak of the back door. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Did someone get in? She thought, straining to hear more clearly. Moving as silently as possible, she made her way to the kitchen where the back door was located. The kitchen light was off, but the sound of the door closing slowly was unmistakable. Grabbing a baseball bat from where it rested against the wall, Mariana approached, trembling with fear. Turning on the light, she saw no one. The door was slightly ajar, the storm's wind causing it to sway gently. She quickly shut it and turned the key in the lock. A momentary relief washed over her, but then she heard another sound. Footsteps upstairs. Mariana stood paralyzed. She knew no one else was home. The steps were slow, deliberate, crossing the hallway above her. Without thinking, she ran to the landline and tried calling the police. But the line was dead. Damn it, the storm cut the connection, she thought, searching for her cell phone. When she found it, she realized it had no signal. She heard the footsteps again, now descending the stairs. Clear and steady. She ran into the bathroom, locking herself inside, trembling. She struggled to control her breathing as she listened to the slow steps moving through the living room. After what felt like hours, silence fell over the house. Mariana waited, straining to hear any sound that might indicate where the intruder was. The silence was more terrifying than the footsteps. Carefully, she unlocked the bathroom door and cracked it open. The hallway was empty. She decided to make a break for the front door. Moving slowly, she reached the entrance, but as she placed her hand on the doorknob, a low chuckle came from behind her. Turning slowly, she saw a tall man with pale skin and wide, unblinking eyes staring directly at her. He stood in the kitchen doorway, a twisted smile on his face. Mariana didn't think twice. She opened the door and ran into the storm, ignoring the rain that drenched her in seconds. She sprinted to the nearest neighbor's house, pounding on the door. Her neighbor, Roberto, a middle-aged man, opened the door, startled by the sight. She explained what had happened, and he immediately called the police. When the officers arrived, they searched the house but found no one. Only the back door was open again, and there were wet footprints that disappeared in the middle of the living room. Mariana never found out who the man was or how he got inside. Her parents installed a security system, but she never stayed in the house alone again. The memory of his wide eyes and twisted smiles still haunts her, especially on stormy nights. The stranger of the night. Gustavo had always been a lover of solitary adventures. He enjoyed driving alone on deserted roads, especially at night, when the world seemed quieter and more introspective. That Friday, he decided to take a short trip to the family's country house, a secluded place surrounded by dense forest and rarely visited. It was the perfect opportunity for a peaceful weekend, far from the city's hustle and bustle. The drive was uneventful at first. Gustavo played his favorite playlist in the car and drove at a steady pace. The road was empty, the sky clear and filled with stars. But as he drove on, heavy clouds began to gather. Lightning streaked across the sky, and a storm seemed imminent. He considered turning back, but decided to press on since he was closer to his destination than to home. Just before midnight, Gustavo reached the road leading to the country house. It was a narrow, winding path, flanked by tall trees swaying in the rising wind. The storm had started, and the only light came from the car's headlights. Driving slowly, he paid close attention to the slick road. Then he saw something that made him slam on the brakes. A figure stood in the middle of the road, its back to him. It appeared to be a man, wearing a long coat and a hat. Gustavo rolled down the window, ignoring the wind and rain that blew into the car. "Do you need help?" he shouted. But the figure didn't respond. He tried again, but the man remained motionless. Unsure of what to do, Gustavo honked, hoping the person would move. Slowly, the man turned his head, revealing a face partially obscured by shadows. But his eyes were visible. They glowed unnaturally, reflecting the light from the headlights. A chill ran down Gustavo's spine. There was something in that gaze that didn't feel human. The figure finally stepped aside, walking slowly to the roadside. Gustavo shifted into gear and sped off, trying to forget what he had just seen. Yet the unease lingered. Who was that man? What was he doing out there in the storm, so far from civilization? When Gustavo arrived at the country house, he was still shaken but tried to convince himself it was just a coincidence. He entered the house, turned on the lights, and poured himself a hot cup of coffee. As the rain lashed against the windows, he tried to relax on the couch. However, the feeling of being watched wouldn't leave him. Around 2 a.m., he heard a sound that made his heart race. 3 slow knocks on the front door. He froze, staring at the entrance, as if he could see through it. Who would be at the door in the middle of a storm in such a remote place? Summoning his courage, he approached the door. "Who's there?" he asked. But there was no response, only the sound of the rain. The knocks came again, louder this time. He looked through the peephole but saw no one. Cautiously, he opened the door, only to find nothing. The rain continued to pour, and the cold wind hit him, but there was no sign of anyone. Gustavo quickly shut, and locked the door. He checked all the windows and doors, ensuring they were secure. Yet the unease wouldn't leave him. He decided sleep was impossible and sat on the couch, clutching a piece of firewood he had taken from the fireplace just in case. As hours passed, the storm began to subside. Gustavo finally began to relax, nearly drifting off to sleep, when he heard a noise from upstairs. Footsteps. He knew no one else was in the house. Gripping the piece of wood tightly, he climbed the stairs slowly, each step creaking under his weight. Reaching the hallway, he noticed that the master bedroom door was ajar. He was certain he had left it closed. Heart pounding, he pushed the door open and turned on the light. The room was empty, but on the floor lay something that shouldn't have been there. A water-soaked hat. Before he could react, he felt a presence behind him. Turning quickly, he saw the man from the road, standing in the hallway, his glowing eyes piercing through the darkness. Gustavo tried to run but tripped and fell to the floor. The man advanced slowly, emitting a low guttural sound that resembled distorted laughter. Gustavo closed his eyes, bracing for the worst. When he opened them again, he was alone. The hat remained on the floor, but the figure had vanished. He fled the house without a second thought, driving through the storm until he reached the city and found refuge in a hotel. The next morning, he returned to the house with a friend, finding everything just as he had left it. The hat was still there, but there were no signs of forced entry. Gustavo never returned to the house alone. Even now, on stormy nights, he wonders who or what he encountered that night. The presence in the old house. Clara was always fascinated by old stories. When she inherited her grandmother's house, a worn and weathered building in a quiet neighborhood, she saw it as the perfect opportunity to restore the property and make something special. The house, with its creaky wooden windows and forgotten attic, had a peculiar charm, but also a certain darkness Clara preferred to ignore. In the first few days after moving in, Clara began to notice strange things. The lights flickered without reason, and the sound of footsteps echoed through empty hallways at night. She attributed it all to the aging house and the strong winds common in the area. Determined not to be intimidated, Clara threw herself into the restoration work. One evening, while sorting through boxes in the attic, she found an old, dusty diary. The cover was worn, but the name Beatriz was engraved in faded letters. Curious, Clara flipped through the pages. The early entries described a cheerful girl recounting her adventures in the house. But as she read further, the tone changed. The final pages were filled with disjointed phrases, such as, "He is here, and I can't escape." A shiver ran down Clara's spine, but she set the diary aside. That same night, Clara was awakened by an odd sound. It was the creak of doors and heavy footsteps descending the stairs. She got up, trembling, and grabbed a flashlight. The house was shrouded in darkness, but the sounds continued. She followed them to the living room, where she found the front door open. The rain poured outside, but there was no one there. Frightened, Clara locked the door and checked all the windows. Returning to her bedroom, she saw something that made her stop in her tracks. The diary was open on her bed, turned to the same page with the phrase, "He is here." Clara was certain she had left it in the attic. Her heart pounding, she closed the book and tried to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. In the days that followed, the occurrences intensified. Objects moved on their own, Whispered voices seemed to emanate from nowhere, and an unshakable feeling of being watched followed Clara throughout the house. She tried to convince herself it was just her imagination, but the sense of danger was undeniable. One night, while taking a hot shower to relax, Clara heard knocks on the bathroom door. Thinking it was another issue with the old house, she turned off the shower and called out, "Who's there?" There was no response, only more knocking, louder this time. Wrapped in a towel, she opened the door slowly, but found the hallway empty. Only the sound of water dripping echoed through the house. Clara decided it was time to dig deeper. She returned to the attic and found more boxes that seemed to belong to the house's previous owner. Among old photographs and personal belongings, she found a sealed letter. The paper was yellowed with age, but still legible. It was from Beatrice, addressed to whoever found the diary. In it, Beatrice warned of a presence that had manifested in the house. According to her, the entity fed on fear and would never leave its inhabitants in peace. That night, Clara woke to a sound that resembled crying coming from downstairs. Grabbing her flashlight, she descended the stairs cautiously, her heart pounding. The living room was dimly lit by moonlight, filtering through the windows. But something was different. In the corner of the room stood a tall, dark figure, completely still. Its eyes glowed like embers fixed on Clara. She tried to scream, but the sound caught in her throat. The figure began to move toward her, each step echoing in the silent house. Clara backed away, tripping over a chair and falling to the ground. When she looked up again, the figure was only a few feet away, bent over as if studying her reaction. In a desperate impulse, Clara grabbed the diary from the table and held it up like a shield. "If you want this, take it and leave," she shouted. To her surprise, the figure stopped and tilted its head, as if considering her offer. Then, without warning, it vanished. The next morning, Clara packed her things and left the house. She never returned, but the diary stayed with her. Sometimes she flips through its pages, searching for answers, but they remain unchanged. Clara sold the house but never told the new owner what happened there. And on quiet nights, she still feels as though she's being watched, even miles away from the old house.